About 6 weeks ago, I got a phone call, and you can imagine what it's like when somebody says, Reverend Jesse Jackson would like to speak with you. You sort of rearrange your schedule. And he told me about his visit to Cincinnati, where the mayor of Cincinnati stood as the first government official at a local level to support an idea that is long, long overdue. The idea that every American is guaranteed the right to vote as a birthright. And we've seen in Pennsylvania how laws can be interpreted and having to go to judges to be able to throw them out into the trash heap of history where they belong. And we see time and time again how this same type of action gets taken because we don't have the guaranteed right to vote in the United States. I was surprised to learn that there are 119 nations that elect their public officials. That's throughout the world. Of those 119 nations, there are only 11 that don't have the protected right to vote as a guaranteed right. Well, we know one of them is the United States. Do you know who the others are? Azerbaijan, Chechnya, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Libya, Pakistan, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. It's time for the United States to join the rest of the world in protecting its citizens. I see Councilman Ricky Burgess is here with us, and hopefully with the support of City Council, the Mayor's Office, and the county, Pittsburgh will become the second city in the United States to support the right to vote as a constitutional amendment.
All right.
But more importantly, today Pittsburgh becomes the first city in the country to be joined not only as the city, but as the county. And as we all know, the right to vote is a function that is administered through the county. And the first county executive in the United States to support this, our county executive, Rich Fitzgerald.
All right.
Thanks, Mayor. And the mayor said it very well. It's hard to believe the list of countries that are only left, that we're one of them. And this was brought, I think, to a lot of our attention in many ways just a couple of years ago when our state legislature tried to suppress the vote and deny people's right to vote. And the one I think that stuck out for all of us was our former mayor, late Mayor Masloff, who didn't have a driver's license at the time and in essence was going to be denied the right to vote. This was somebody who had voted for decades, year after year, never missed an election, but because of these legislative laws that were put into place, she, among many others, were going to be denied the right to vote. So it is time for Congress and legislatures across this country to introduce and pass a constitutional amendment making it a right for everybody. I'm joined here by County Council President John DeFazio. We will be introducing a resolution to County Council tomorrow night, urging again our citizens across this nation to pass this amendment. As Bill said, getting a call from Reverend Jackson, who's been fighting these fights and these battles for longer than most of us can certainly remember. Certainly myself and Bill. But what Reverend Jackson's been doing for many, many years, fighting on behalf of people that don't have a voice, people that are denied rights, whether it be rights in jobs, whether it be rights in housing, whether it be rights in voting. We're glad to have him here today. We're glad to have him in Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County, to make sure that his voice is heard with, as Bill said, a great cross-section of leaders across this community who are out there fighting for the rights of others. So without further ado, our good friend, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Let me express my thanks and delight in having the opportunity to come to Pittsburgh again, as I've been blessed to come here across the years, speaking to high schools in this city, at the universities, and working with, if you will, Nate Smith, working with Norman Johnson and Dr. Bell and so many others across the years in this city. At that time, Reverend H. Beecher Hicks was our rat at that time. And yet, this city remains amazing in its industrial development and in its diversification as a city. Our struggle today is to one, continue to get a more perfect union. It is to democratize democracy. That's been maybe the most fundamental struggle in America, is to democratize democracy so that all of us count as persons and not corporations as persons, or money as persons, or some sub-persons and some super-persons. When the Steelers played the Seattle team in football, or Chicago, New York, as the case may be, we are relieved in that few hours of democratic engagement because we can, at that time, choose uniform color over skin color, direction over complexion. If we win, we feel a bit of joy. If we lose, we can adjust. But there's never any bitterness after the game because of the conditions in which the game was played, whether Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or Seattle, Washington, New York City, or Chicago. What made it possible for us to enjoy, to accept the outcome, the playing field is even. The rules are public. The goals are clear. The referees are fair, and the scores are transparent. If Pittsburgh played by one set of rules here in Pittsburgh, another set in Seattle, Washington, another set in Houston, you cannot determine the winner because there would be too much confusion about the rules. If one team had to run 10 yards for a first down, another team had to run 12 yards, the one that ran 10 yards inherited some yards, the one that ran 12 yards came a split family. But on the field, that doesn't matter. We have rules that guide and protect the integrity of the game. But in elections, we don't have a one national election. We have 50 separate state and unequal elections. But states control the process and the outcome of our elections. Up in 1870, because of slavery, African Americans could not vote, Native Americans could not vote, women could not vote till the 1920s. All the struggles democratized our democracy. And then finally in 1870, we got the implied right to vote in the Constitution because of that which is not explicit is implied, which meant the states control voting, healthcare, education, and justice. That's in the state's domain. So finally, after 95 years, we got the right to vote in 1965. We did not realize that the right to vote involved so much more than we were meeting on that bridge. One was we found that blacks could not vote because of manipulative scheme, because those who once controlled slavery controlled the voting process. White women couldn't serve on juries in 1967. 18-year-olds couldn't vote, those serving in Vietnam. You couldn't vote on campuses unless you went home to vote, or voted absentee, an impediment. You couldn't vote bilingual until 1975, and now get proportionality and representation to 1988. It took us 25 years beyond the right to vote in Selma to deal with issues like gerrymandering, annexation, at-large, rural prison. These were terms, we had no idea what these terms meant to us at that time. Now the newest set of schemes beyond that is this issue of voter ID, limited the number of days you can vote. One of the clearest accounts that we saw in 1990, year 2000, the Secretary of State brought in names from prison rolls in Texas, and they read them with prison names and names in Florida, confused the process. And as they unraveled that scheme, and they began to count the vote, the state's law said we don't vote here after 12 o'clock on Tuesday night. So we end the count before the count is over. So President Bush had a 527 vote lead with 27,000 votes in Nevada County. He won by the margin of uncounted votes. Does not matter who would have won, but all votes should have counted.
That's right.
In 2004, Secretary of State in charge of the election in Ohio, we had dry machines and wet people. And that determined the outcome in Columbus, Ohio, and parts of Cleveland and Cincinnati. We're not making a partisan appeal here for Democrats. It's about democracy. Republicans is about the republic. We want an integrity in our democracy. As I've traveled around the world, we go to a given country that wants American relationships and wants American aid or American trade. We say it must be open, free, and fair. Open, free, and fair. That's the standard, open, free, and fair. We don't have open, free, and fair elections in our own country. And there are those who are determined to put an institution, a corporation, over an individual, undermining the integrity of our system, are determined to make voting less accessible to people who are poor or rural. People who live in the Allegheny Hills and the Appalachian Hills, a most difficult time to have the vote because of how far they have to travel, and oftentimes don't have the qualifications. And yet these same people that pay federal taxes, they're the first to go to war, and yet when they come home, they do not have the rights for which they fought abroad. Lastly, the appeal we make today is we seek to make this a more perfect union, not very far from Gettysburg. It's to show all Americans a fundamental, constitutional protected right to vote. And it should be in the Constitution. We should amend the Constitution to say just that. All Americans should have the fundamental constitutional right to vote. On this, I close. In 1965, or since that time, most people really think they have that right now. They don't. That's why each state has its own set of rules on the national election. In the NFL, every team does not have its own, so there's one set of rules. Whenever there's one set of rules, and the player in field is even, we can accept the outcome. Now, I'm from South Carolina at the beginning. 1/4 the people in poverty. The people that pay federal taxes and serve in the military. The government decides not to let Medicaid money come into the state, $11 billion. Condemns a fourth of people to have less and fewer life options. All the Confederate states, really from Virginia around to Missouri to Texas, decided unanimously to reject federal money for the poor. They didn't want federal money for highways, 90%, 10% state. They wanted in their state budgets grow from 40 to 51% of the state budgets are federal. They want federal money for the bridges and the roads, for the airports, for tourism, for universities, but not for the poor. We take the position of all Americans who stand on that one flag and take that allegiance to have the right, the fundamental protected right to vote. Again, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. County Chair, thank you very much.
Proclamations on me, recognizing and supporting your initiative.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure Dr. King would rejoice today, and the martyrs who made it possible here, and Mr. Mandela and others who followed our lead of a nonviolent struggle to make our democracy real for all of its people, today rejoice in the signing of this resolution.
Any questions?
Questions?
Mr. Jackson, talk about the significance, Cincinnati and now Pittsburgh, the significance of these two cities now coming together.
Cincinnati in part because it's one of the depots for the Underground Railroad. Cincinnati in part because of a history of activism. People like Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth came to Cincinnati, Reverend Otis Moss. And they asked to be a part of this movement led by Representative Reese in Ohio. Ohio because it's one of the states where voter impediment schemes have been very apparent in late years. The courts have had to overrule the governor over and over again. Well, Pennsylvania, a bellwether state for democracy in our nation, is now under the same type threats of easy access to democracy. And Pittsburgh is a key city in the spirit of America, not far from Gettysburg. This is the right place at the right time to a share in the leadership of Pittsburgh's vision for this state and for the nation.
So what's next? What's next?
Next is for us to get the Congress people in the area to sign on the H.R. 44. 2/3 of the Congress has to move on this. But we're convinced that what we need is to enlighten people as to what the stakes are. Most people who follow your press do not realize they do not have the fundamental constitutional right to vote. They think it's about the city of Pittsburgh or Allegheny County or the Pennsylvania. They don't have the federal constitutional right to vote. And that protection would take away a lot of pain and distrust at election time. And from the right to vote proceeds the rest of our rights. From those who vote can fight for student loan debt being reduced or eliminated. They can fight for ending Parent Plus loans. They can fight for livable wages. They can fight for all of the American promises. But if they have been eliminated by state schemes of voter impediments, if they have been locked out because corporations now have the power of an individual, which obviously is not true, then our democracy is a sham. We want a more perfect and complete union.
Anything else? Thanks, everyone.
Reverend Jackson, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
A lot of leaders in this room have been fighting the fight for a while. I'm sure they'd like to